with Renee.
Yo. We wait all week and all day for more Saturdays with Renee.
Yes. What's up, world? Welcome to episode 91 of Saturdays with Renee, right here on Black Liberation Media. I'm Jared Ball. That is obviously Renee Johnston. And welcome. Please like, share, subscribe, support the platform on your way in. And welcome to those who are here live, and to those who will see this later. Welcome and peace to you as well. Please do the same. Renee, how you feeling?
Listen, I got so caught up reading Musa stuff because I like to be fresh. So it's going to sound crazy, but what I end up doing a lot when we have guests who share links is like I skim it first and then I go back between Friday night and Saturday morning and I read it fully and I take my notes and what, because I want it to be fresh. I don't want it to be like, you know, what I read again like a week ago. So I always wait until the last minute to do it. The downside of this is when you have a guest who is a prolific writer, right? So then I was like following threads, like he has like a link and something he wrote that's actually something else he wrote. And so now I'm reading something that wasn't even on his list of stuff for us to read. But I just, man.
Yeah, shout out to Musa, who will be joining us shortly. So folks, again, put this in your socials, invite others to join you. And don't be stingy. But yeah, I get it. That happens. You think there have been times where I've showed up in the studio early and then I get into something and then I end up rushing and then I'm late in the end because I've lost track of time, you know. But that's not always just because I'm trying to be prepared. That's just being absent-minded.
But then also this morning, I started out watching your talk on, is it deculture? Why am I blanking?
Deculturation.
Deculturation from yesterday. And so I'm like 2/3 of the way through that. And I was like, okay, if I don't stop watching this right now, I'm not going to have enough time to finish the reading.
Yeah, no, it was big salute to Carlos at Deculturation. It was a lot of fun. And I had a blast. And the revisit, we got to revisit the classic debate between Glenn Ford and Sam Cedar, which it was just so much fun and at the same time frustrating to revisit it. But it's always good to be reminded of Glenn's brilliance and to do it in the context of this next generation hater. Carlos is I have hope for the future. So it was a lot of fun. So salute to him. And
it was good. And that's where I was. I think you all had just started to talk about Glenn Ford and I'm going to forget the other person's name now, Dixon.
And Bruce Dixon. Yeah.
And their historical knowledge of Obama when he was a senator. And so.
And even before that, like Bruce knew of him back when he was claiming to be a community organizer, and you know, because Bruce was from Chicago and had all those, and was in the political streets for real. So I was particularly well positioned working with them to just be put on to Obama's fakery early, like before he was even announcing himself nationally. He was already on their radar.
Okay.
So same thing with like Cory Booker, like that's where, they were early on Cory Booker. So, just both of them, rest in power to both of them, and salute to Margaret and the rest of the Black Agenda Report crew for keeping it going.
Listen, it's a lot of work, all this writing and stuff, man. I don't know how folks do it. I'd be struggling. Like I've had a article on that the palace, like the sign on to not support genocide, like on the back burner easily since Eugene was on. I started it. It's there. I'll get it out eventually. But Lord, it's a lot.
I'm literally this morning. Literally, I've been talking about it for months, and it's now a 3,900 word book chapter. It's not even that, but it's not even. And I've been struggling, but it's due Monday, so it's getting submitted Monday.
You gotta do it.
And
I actually need to ask you to write something with me. I forgot.
No.
Yeah, I know,
Josie,
no. But I told Josie I would ask.
Oh no!
No.
You're
not gonna say no.
I'm not gonna say no. I'm just gonna complain,
but you're gonna
and I'm gonna struggle through it. I did tell other people no, though. I did have to tell a couple other people no, and I feel bad, but I was like, I got to be real with you. I'm not gonna do a good job, and I'm not gonna it's not gonna be turned around fast enough, and I don't. And I just want this. I need a break. This 3,900 words has been working me.
It's not anything that we have to do in the immediate, but she would like us to joint write something on Blood in My Eye.
Oh, word. All right, now I'm motivated for that. Okay, all right.
Say less. You wouldn't say no.
Say less. George Jackson, I'm amped now. I'm ready. All right, let's go.
So,
but salute to the writers. I know we got one in the wings waiting to join us.
Prolific.
And they and people like Gerald Horne probably writ like 5 books just during this introduction. Salute to them. So we ready?
We ready? There is no need to delay.
All right, so everybody knows who our guest is, but let me get the appropriate, let's get the welcome back to the platform, Musa. Let's get the we got to do it a little bit right for the All-Stars.
Peace, y'all. I appreciate the kind words. I'm honored to be featured in one of Renee's rabbit holes, apparently, from what I'm hearing.
I need a ladder. And you be having the nerve to include like links to your writings in your writing. So then next thing I'm like 5 articles deep from the thing that I started, not realizing what was going to happen. But it's a salute to you, man. Seriously, like big salutes. You're
I appreciate that. Also, let me say 2 things right out the gate. One, to have me on 1 week after y'all had Dwayne, is his name Dwayne, right? Dwayne. First off, that's so disrespectful because that might be one of the most brilliant brothers alive. I feel like, I mean, the 2 or 3 interviews I've heard with him, I don't know how I could possibly even contend with following that up. And then 2, Jared, shout out to you and this 3-hour-long deculturation. Yeah. I made it about halfway through when y'all were reviewing the Sam Cedar footage. I didn't get quite past that yet. Fun. But it was a really phenomenal conversation. I'm always in awe of how you approach certain topics and subjects. And from the time you and I first met in Baltimore in 2017 to talk about Malcolm X till now, I think I'm a child of some sort of your hateration, your haterade.
I just want to make room for it. That's the role I feel like, my generational role. I just want to encourage that people find their hater space and let that flag fly. So I appreciate it. And in terms of the Dwayne, like I count on this week to week, Musa. that I count on the poor memory of some of our audience so that they don't. So I'm hoping Dwayne isn't as fresh, you know, and people will just sort of remember as a vibe of brilliance and not the details, so that we can all make it through this week, you know.
Inshallah.
But
Inshallah.
yeah. No, shout out, man, Carlos, man, that was a lot of fun. That deculturation joint. I didn't expect to be able to make it that long. 3 hours was a lot, but it was so much fun. So salute to him.
Yeah, when I saw the 3 hours, I was like, this can't be right.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. And I was like, Jared sat in a chair for 3 hours? Wait, what just happened?
But it started early.
It is an interesting interview model, because I will say, after about the first 45 minutes to an hour, Jared, you were like a warmed up athlete. You know what I mean? Like, I think the 3 hour model, maybe they're onto something, because there was sort of like the energy kind of actually upward trended, I felt like, you know.
No, I agree. And I would rather have 3 hours than 15 minutes. That I don't do well in 15, 20 minutes. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I hope people check it out.
You're not a good sound. You're not a sound bite in a short.
Man. I'm not a rally speech maker. I'm not a, you know what though?
You do well in rally speeches. I think you do. I've watched it, Jared. I've been in front of you. What are you talking about?
No. But I'm terrible in those, 5 minute, 6 minute media hits. It's terrible. And rest in peace to Damu Smith. I mean, I was in his Black Voices for Peace training sessions once upon a time, where he tried to train me and a few others to be able to, what is the line on Israel in 60 seconds. Now do it in 30 seconds. Now do it in 10 seconds. Now do it in 5 seconds. And I should have stayed in that training. I'll leave it at that.
Well, it's so funny you bring up Damu Smith. I wasn't too familiar with who he was, maybe an age thing. And it wasn't until I was actually with Koreans at the Korea University abroad. They knew of him based on his Korea solidarity work educated me on who he was. And so I actually learned a lot about his legacy, photos and videos. And
wow.
So
yeah, right on.
Damu Smith for sure.
And he did give me that line. My favorite line that he did give me, when he said, we met up for lunch one day, and he said, man, I had just dropped my daughter off and the cab driver said to him, so it's daddy daughter. He said, what was the line? It's daddy daughter day or it's daddy daycare. That's what he called it. The cab driver called it daddy daycare. And Damu said, this is not daycare. He said, I'm raising my daughter. Mm. And that stuck with me even before I had my children. And I was like, somebody said that to me one day, and I said, no, this is not daddy daycare. I'm raising my children. What you talk about? I'm permanently ensconced. Like I'm an institution in this. No, I'm just playing. Anyway, rest in power to him. And salute.
So just for the folks who randomly have come across Saturdays today, and for whatever bizarre reason have no idea who Musa is, can we start with our general, please introduce yourself, let the folks know who you are, who you with, where you came from, how you got here, all that good stuff. And then I got like 2 pages of notes. I know, see, this is so the bad side of my rabbit hole is then I end up with all these questions. So we'll take it slow, but I feel like it's all gonna work out.
Yeah,
we'll start with the intro.
Absolutely, and I'm getting over a little bit of cold, so if I have to mute and cough a little bit, forgive me. But I'm both a Muslim and a revolutionary, and in both of those traditions, we believe in introducing ourselves every time we get the chance and never assuming one's knowledge. And so, my name is Musa Springer. Formerly D. Springer, as some of y'all knew me, Dev. I've been a journalist, cultural worker, and writer for going on 10 to 11 years now. Community organizer in Atlanta, Metro Atlanta area. Originally started organizing around issues related to police repression and prisons, trying to get as close to possible to the issue that everyone was talking about at the time, but no one could tell you where their local jail or prison actually was located. And I felt like there was a gap to bridge there. My background before dropping out of college twice was in African diaspora studies and communications. And I try to take that with me in every single thing that I do. Also, I guess relevant to this conversation is I was a news producer for international news station RT America, and where I was able to produce a documentary on Parchment Prison, another one on Native hip hop and queer cultural work. And so I try to really work, my work is really in trying to bridge this gap in how we think about culture, revolutionizing culture, and then doing what journalism is supposed to do, which is connecting with people and criticizing power, more or less. I'm with the Walter Rodney Foundation, been a humble cog in that machine as a volunteer for going on 8 years now, 9 years. Shout out to Patricia Rodney and Asha Rodney, who have nurtured me over the years and helped me to have the correct line on a lot of things. how to not be a reactionary at times, even though that's the easier option. Currently, I'm also with the Black Alliance for Peace, Atlanta Citywide Alliance, aka BAP ATL. I apologize to all my BAP comrades that I'm not in the national meeting right now. I am on this live stream currently, but you know, when Renee calls, I had to answer, of course. And so, yeah, also, I guess I don't really say this as much anymore because, you know, time, money, resources, but also I'm a photographer, an artist. You know, I have a actual cultural work as an artist too, although, like I said, these days, I just be having to do whatever pays the bills a lot of the time, unfortunately. But, and then last but not least, certainly, I'm the international youth representative for Cuba's Red Barrial Afrodescendiente. That's the Afro-Descendant Neighborhood Network, a grassroots popular education collective and organization I humbly try to support in my capacity. As the youth representative, organizing delegations for Africans in the US to meet Africans in Cuba and learn from each other. The organization that is the center subject of the documentary, which I am trudging through for Black Liberation Media, and happy to be here. I'll leave it at that.
So, she can I tell y'all how I get yelled at often by my mother, because she's like, why you always bring me up? But I'm like, it's life, mommy. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. But can I just tell you how you just pinged her ears by talking about doing something for RT, which she literally has rolling on her television consistently throughout the day. So if she hasn't already seen it, which is a possibility given all the stuff she watches, she's now going to go look for it. So shout out to moms, and, you know, shout out to you, because I had no idea that was in your list. So dope.
Yeah, I'll also say too, sometime in the future, there's an expose of, we were RT America. We were the US branch, 1 block away from the White House, 1325 G Street Metro Station. And there were struggles, you know, we were wanting to unionize, we were wanting to fight against some internal conflicts and issues. And when RT America went under, a lot of the corporate media reached out to us for interviews, thinking we were going to have this very anti-Russia, Russiagate stance. And instead, we were actually wanting to talk about these union struggles. So the stories were never published because of the kind of interviews we gave. So in the future, you know, maybe we could bring on some former RT people and talk about that important legacy at some point here too.
What's up? This came up yesterday. What's up with the left media and being anti-union? Like this is like a real issue.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it is. And even my time at Redfish, which is explicitly leftist, explicitly communist, there's no African worker there who enjoyed their time working there. I'll put it like that. And no African worker there who was getting the same paycheck either. And some of us have publicly written about that. And yeah, I think some people forget RT America was not necessarily left. It was an alternative news station that had left TV shows on the station. Some good ones too, some really good ones. But the management was essentially one libertarian capitalist dude who plagiarized part of his PhD dissertation and was a bumbling idiot. But nonetheless, I'm not going to get into that here.
Ooh, that's some good tea though.
I know. I like that. This is a circle back. This is a Renee notes, bring Musa back so we could get into this part, because the list is already long. I don't know. Whew. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And it feeds my consistent conversation about these struggles about the big tent, right? Like this conversation of like, well, you have to allow everybody in to organize. And my answer being, I do not have to concede my safe space just to let other people into the tent. Like, fuck them. Like, my potential harm is not up for grabs so that y'all can feel like you let everybody in. Like, sorry, I literally have no interest in participating in that. And so it's a conversation that I'm always having in multiple spaces that often gets ignored when I ask the question, because in one of my organizing spaces, we had this whole big tent thing and somebody responded with something and I wrote back and I said, you just wrote an answer that literally lets me know that you've never been called the N-word in an organizing space. So tell me how you're going to prevent my harm in this situation. I got no answer, just so y'all know, just FYI.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say too, maybe it's because I'm from Georgia, I'm from Atlanta, we fight. So I don't know. Like we just put hands and paws, feet, hands, elbows, and ankles on people when need be. So, one instance that sticks out, I know this isn't the topic, but one instance that really sticks out is as RT America, they tried to force us to register as foreign agents, even though the majority of the office was actually US born. As Trump came into office, the crackdown on RT America actually kind of got more intense. But it was really the groundwork was laid by the Democrats. And the management tried to appeal to the right wing by bringing on right-wing hosts of new right-wing shows to appeal to this new right-wing turn in national politics, thinking it would save them. Obviously, there's no more RT America, so it didn't. But they wanted to bring on guests like Milo Yiannopoulos, known pedophile, far-right, extremist, right? And there were many of us in the office who straight up walked to management and said, like, if you bring this man in here, half of your crew will be leaving in handcuffs because it will get very violent. And I am okay with that being the outcome. Are you okay with that being the outcome? And so, the broad tent approach is what is sometimes needed. It is not what is always best for objectives and strategy. Especially when we're talking about our organizing spaces, we have to have a very strategic approach to how we engage people, because if you got a fascist on your team, you're doing something wrong, right? Anyways.
No, but that's legit. And I'm actually glad you said something that I literally have written down in my notes, and it's from the statement that you wrote after what occurred when you were coming back. I think it was the Cuba delegation, and then you were on your way back. And so I guess we can just start with that conversation. But literally, I have this quote from your statement. Be strategic, brave, and smart in equal measures. Protect one another, because no part of this system, nor what is to come, is designed to protect us. And so that's just in line. What you just said reminded me that you wrote this in your statement. So I guess we can start there with with what happened, I don't know how much of it you can discuss, because I know you're in the midst of a suit. I don't know like where that is in the process of what's going on. But if you can give whatever information you could give about how this particular suit ended up being a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually we're on the other side of a suit now. So I'm freed up to speak a bit more about it than I could when I came on the morning show. And right off the gate, I can't go on without giving a lot of praise and shout out to Kamal K. Franklin, hooked me up with the lawyers that really supported me throughout all that. If it wasn't for Kamal, I don't know what could have happened. But essentially there were several, as you all know, there's several international foreign students who have been targeted by the administration for their solidarity with Palestine. Some of them who happen to be some of my best friends in life. And the situation was dire in the headlines and much worse in real life. I think, Jared, when you traveled up to Cornell, you heard firsthand from maybe some of these African students, the experiences they were going through. From that point, weeks later, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so a good friend of mine decided to launch a lawsuit against Trump and DHS for the unlawful arrest order, detainment orders, and deportation orders against not just him, but all foreign students. And at the time, he couldn't leave one room for a few weeks. He was pretty much trapped in one room because ICE was searching for him unlawfully. And I don't say that to like reinforce the idea that the law in this colonial ass empire is the arbiter of moral goodness or ethics, just to sort of reinforce for liberals listening that shit don't matter. And so, it was basically a countdown to when is he going to be arrested by ICE and thrown into a detention center for an indefinite amount of time before being deported. This is a PhD student who had a very long life ahead of him here in the US, ironically. And when he made the decision to choose to self-deport, to leave the country lawfully instead of going to a prison facility, which is, I can't fault anyone for making that choice. If you have the option of not being behind prison or being in prison, I think you can speak with any of our former Panthers, for example, and they'll tell you we didn't want to be in prison, right? And so I supported and assisted in his self-deportation, which was my legal right to do as a U.S. citizen. Lawyer said I have to make sure to say that. And so, this was something that came with some risks. It came with some consequences. And afterwards, days afterwards, I traveled to Cuba, as I often do, multiple times a year. Have never had any major really issues. It's always maybe you get pulled aside for 10, 15 minutes, but they let you go. This time, however, when I returned into the country, and again, it had been supporting that friend, travel abroad, then return all in the course of a week or two in April, the beginning of April this year. When I went through the line in customs upon entering into the country in Tampa, they knew me, they knew my name, they knew my face, and they made it obvious they didn't care if I was aware, right? I got to the customs agent. They typically ask you 3 questions. Where are you coming from? What were you doing there? Did you bring any tobacco or alcohol, rum with you? And usually you just say coming from Cuba, support from the Cuban people, which is support for the Cuban people is your legal entry point in and out of Cuba. And then no, I don't have any tobacco or rum, right? The moment I said Cuba and the customs agent looked up and saw my face, his whole entire tone and demeanor, cadence, everything about him changed as if they had been waiting on me. And then when he looked at my passport and read my name, obviously I always opt out of facial recognitions software, and he kind of laughed and made this kind of like, oh buddy, that's the least of your worries kind of statement. You know, it was just extremely, extremely clear they knew who I was and that whatever I had been engaged in the last week or two, they were mad about. I was pulled into a secondary screening room and on and off for about 4 to 5 hours between the waiting room and the general questioning inspection room, interrogated for 4 to 5 hours. This included a pat down and a body search, which was extremely invasive. This included all of my personal belongings being searched through. This included being asked and questioned about other foreign students here in the US who are also activists and organizers, as well as professors, certain professors who are maybe known in social justice spaces, asking me things like, have you received any military training in Cuba? Have you visited the Middle East? And if so, did you receive military training in the Middle East? You know, they went through my social medias. They searched my name on Google. They are not very smart whatsoever. I don't want anyone listening to this to think that there's some masterminds. They just have the confidence of power and authority over individuals. And so, you know, long story short, this was a very traumatic ordeal that ended with them seizing my devices, my laptop, my cell phone. Ironically, I had every single hard drive from the documentary in my bag, and they didn't find it. Actually, it was hidden in not hit even intentionally hidden. Actually, it was just in a pocket. Anyways, they seized my phone and my laptop, and then I'm in the Tampa airport. They held me so long, I not only missed my connecting flight back to Atlanta, I actually missed the last connecting flight back to Atlanta. So with no phone, no cell phone, only about $80 cash on me, I had to get a taxi to the nearest motel. When I got to the motel, of course, I'm like, hey, can y'all help me get a car to the nearest Best Buy? I need to buy a cell phone. The front desk people are like, we're just a motel. We don't do all that. We don't do all that. And I'm like, yo, I'm in this airport. I asked about 8 different people to use their phone because literally at the time, I just wanted to call my mama. That's all I wanted to do. I'm at this point, I'm just like, I just need to call my mom and give her Erica Kane's number or something. You know, I don't know. But and so it wasn't until maybe 10 o'clock that night, I was finally able, I had to walk a mile to a Best Buy, get a phone, get it activated. All these things, you know, really pile up in just the course of a few hours. And then fast forward, about a week later, with help from the Center for Constitutional Rights and another lawyer in Florida, we actually filed a case in federal court for the unlawful seizure of my devices specifically. And, you know, I've never done something like that before. I'm of the mindset, like when you grow up poor, you avoid courts and lawsuits and suing people and all. You avoid that at literally any cost. Like I never want to see my full government name versus United States of America. Like that was not in the cards for Musa at all. And ironically, the federal judge in the Florida district where we had to file this motion was the same judge that prosecuted Tiger King on behalf of Carol Baskin, ironically enough. So
oh, wow.
Just, I mean, the bizarreness of this story kind of multiplies to me with every detail. It's like,
I saw you on Netflix.
Yeah. It's a Black woman who was appointed by George Bush, who prosecuted Tiger King. And so within about 48 hours of our ruling, she actually ruled in our favor and said that ICE had to immediately return my devices. And it's not so much the devices themselves that are the issue. I have a 7 and a 15-year-old cousin who are with me 4 days a week. I'm not engaged in any illegal activity that I know of, at least. It's just the precedent that this sets, you know, and so now we've kind of created actually a legal precedent to which anyone can actually follow the exact same legal route that I took should it happen to them, which is, I guess you could call it a win. I mean, I don't, you know, depends on who you ask. Well, I'll leave it at that. So yeah, you know, the bad thing happened. We took them to court in the federal court, ended up surprisingly winning. We did also, we petitioned the court and got them to DHS. They signed a letter stating that they did not download or retain any information from my devices. They did not state whether or not they accessed the devices. And in fact, they refused to do so, right? And so I ended up launching a fundraiser to try to get some new devices because I work for my computer, and to cover legal fees. A lot of people throw this term movement lawyer around, but when it's time to do some pro bono work, it was not a lot of people to be found. And then, groups like Black Liberation Media, Black Men Build, helped me complete that fundraiser. So I'm forever indebted and thankful to them. And now it's just been a crazy 2025. I'll leave it at that. See if you have any other questions, but yeah.
Well, you answered one, because I actually had a note about setting a precedent, because I noticed that within the suit, because I don't think people understand how wild I get with this stuff. Like, I read the whole suit. Like, I wanted every detail about like what was actually in the filing. And so I had a note here that it said no adequate remedy at law. And I was like, oh, so there's no legal precedent for what happened with this case. So should Musa win, this is going to set a legal precedent for other people, which means, unfortunately for you, who never wanted your name on anything, your name is about to be synonymous every time someone has to file something. It is going to reference Springer versus US for the legal precedent for why they gotta get their shit back.
Yeah, and this is my first lawsuit, to be honest with you. I was naive to how that even works, to be honest. So there was one other case in precedent in which TSA, I believe, not Customs, but TSA, which they're all the alphabet boys under the DHS umbrella. Should be clear about that. Under the same umbrella as ICE. I should also mention a detail that I keep forgetting to mention. When I was in secondary screening, every single Customs and Border Patrol agent, every single one, I saw about 24 during this time, were all Latino. They were all Latin American descendant. They all had last names like Reyes, and so, like, I just want to be clear. It's the equivalent of when you go to the Atlanta Police Department and you go inside the office and there's nothing but Black police officers everywhere, and you're like, what's Dr. Fubar say? The coon chip activated, So the coon chip was certainly activated in that space, and I think so there was one other case that we used a little bit of precedent on, but it was very, very different grounds. And so we were nervous. We didn't even know if that case would help or not. In the court of law, it basically didn't. So like you're saying, Renee, we did create new legal precedent for this. Also, like being a US born citizen, which nowadays the word citizen is like, I don't know that it's ever meant anything, but maybe never meant less than right now, right? That was also like a new realm of repression, like that we haven't really seen. ICE is currently claiming if you are within a border crossing, you are under the dictates of DHS and ICE, and they are claiming that any international airport is considered a border crossing. They're also at the same time, this is like, they're saying if you're within a 100-mile radius of a border, they have legal dictate over you. The issue is, what does that mean if someone lives, anywhere around near an hour from the coast, anywhere in the US, an hour, 90 miles from any international airport in the US?
I was going to say BWI airport is right there, son. That's like everybody is.
And for me, as is Newark.
Yeah. And I thought,
right.
So that's wild, because when I admit to being to being late to all that's been happening to you. So when I was reading for today, so when you're saying in your case, when they said that Tampa was considered an international airport, you're saying I read that as that was specific. I was thinking because Florida, whatever, but you're saying all of them. All international.
If you're doing international travel, say you go on a trip to Germany and then you return and you go through, I don't know, Detroit International Airport. They're saying that is then considered a border crossing. And they're intentionally exploiting legal confusion, because even the lawyers I spoke with, some lawyers from places like Project South, shout out Project South, who also gave me some support. They're like, we don't necessarily believe that. Like, this is something that hasn't really been said before. We're not sure. It's an intentional gray area they're creating so that whether you're a Black person who's been here for 40 generations since enslavement, or you're someone who just arrived a few months ago, they're creating a gray area in which your rights are suspended. The other thing, which you probably read in the court case, Renee, is that was the opening line of my interrogation. The agent, who was not just a regular customs agent, they actually brought in their counterterrorism unit specialist. So I'm getting the terrorist extremist treatment. My first question is like, okay, well, where's my lawyer? Like, let me just call my lawyer, which, feels like a flex. I'm like, I've seen white people do this on TV all the time. Let me just throw that out there. And he's like, oh, well, because this is considered a border crossing, your rights are suspended here. Right? That's actually how he opened up and started the interrogation. So it's a fear tactic. It's a confusion tactic. It makes you feel like, does that mean am I compelled to talk? Right? So it opens up this kind of can of worms of consequences. And so you do always, this is not legal advice, but you do always have the right to remain silent. I think they try to intentionally confuse you, but at a border crossing, you don't necessarily have the right to a lawyer, is my understanding. And they use that to confuse people into thinking you also don't have the right to remain silent. So a lot of fuck shit, to be blunt about it.
That's wild. Yeah, I mean, I read through the whole thing and I was like, damn, they put them through the ringer. Like, it was just, it was extra. It was like the whole thing was just extra. And then, you start thinking about like, you stranded in the airport with no phone, no computer, no means to communicate with anybody. And like, just realizing this is a real, like, this could create a real, like, what if you didn't have the money to go get a hotel room? What if you didn't have the means to go get a new phone? What if you did, all kinds of stuff could happen, right? And so for me, what this highlighted was a real opening to a very serious problem of how people get disappeared, right? Like, how all of a sudden we're all like, yo, what happened to so-and-so? Like, they're just like, what happened, right? And that's really, for me, very, very problematic. And I've never met you in person. Like, I would imagine if we met in person, it would be all good and, all the good stuff. But it didn't matter. Like, in my head, all I could think was, I would be desperate. Like, I would be fucked up if like we were like, what happened to Musa? Like, they just disappeared. Like, what happened? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But that's how it happens. Like, that's like your story is literally how that happens.
Yeah. It's it's a cascading or a domino effect where, and to be clear too, I actually haven't really spoken about this publicly, except I think only on the Remix Morning Show with Kamal, like the week after it happened, and once on Rap, the radio show I host. Other than that, it has taken me months to process everything, because what they want you to do is panic. They want you to be paranoid. They want you to act out of a reactionary fear. This is part of the intention. It's not that they think Musa is a terrorist. They know Musa is not a terrorist. They know Musa is not a threat, an extremist, whatever they want to call it. Maybe a Black identity extremist, perhaps. But, they know all of this, right? It's more so they want you to freak out and react in a manner that is freaking out. And so, you're allowed the autonomy of your emotions. You're allowed in the moment to feel fear, to be confused, scared. Like I said, I just wanted to talk to my mama. I was like, my mama might be the most least political person in my whole entire life, and that was still the first person I wanted to talk to. But you can also imagine someone with less political orientation, and that happens to them, and they're freaking out, right? And the disappearance of, for me, was just a few hours, could have been a few days or weeks. And then the last thing I'll say too is the idea that this is not our fight when it comes to migration, deportation. I was seeing flashes of my face in an El Salvadorian prison, as dramatic as that sounds, as dramatic as that sounds. And so we really have to understand, like, this empire has never wanted to give us citizenship, has never protected the flimsy citizenship any of us have had. And when I was in the airport, I went up to a total of 8 different people to ask to use their phones. I specifically only went to Black people, and I went to people who did not look like they were rushing to their flight. I didn't want to look threatening to anyone. I said, I'm in the airport. It's already a very policed place. But what would have happened if someone got scared of me coming up and asking people to use their phones and then called the local police on me in the airport? You know what I mean? Like, there's a way that this expands and this ripples out into more consequences. And so anyways, I'll stop there. But yeah, it's been a saga that I did not anticipate in any way, shape, or form. Yet here we are.
And that's often how it works, right? Like you never anticipate what, like, you may in the back of your mind at times, like, consider like what the worst case scenario is of something that could happen in any given situation. But when something bad happens, often it's like the one thing that you didn't really contemplate was going to be the thing that happens, right? And so I commend you for being able to not like freak out and for being able to like manage it in such a way that they had no choice but to let you leave, right? Because you're right. What they want you to do is freak out, do or say something that gives them reason to hold you longer, right? Like that's the end goal for them, is like, how long can we keep this person like held until we absolutely have no choice but to let them go? And then it just never, there's so many bad things that could come out of that situation. And
also too,
go ahead.
Also one small, I guess not small, but one point is my crime was going to Cuba, right?
Right.
My crime was supporting someone who the government wanted to deport in their self-deporting. Let's you know what I'm saying? Like, on a basic level, they are doing what the state was telling them to do.
Right.
And then on the other hand was me afterwards traveling legally to an island 90 miles off the coast of Florida, where their main export around the world is doctors. Mm-hmm. And I think we can't miss that part either, that there's this demonization of this island underneath a 65-year blockade, right, that has given revolutionaries refuge for years.
Right.
Had I been coming back from Puerto Rico or somewhere else, would Puerto Rico's a U.S. colony, right, but you get what I'm saying. Had I been coming back from somewhere else, would the response have been different? I think so. Like, I think we're in a very, very, very intensified anti-Cuba era right now, where they're trying to take one of the most historically peaceful, progressive, supportive of humanity at large. I mean, what was the COVID global pandemic in 2020 would have been the Ebola pandemic a decade earlier had it not been for Cuban doctors risking their lives, right? And so that also is part of this repression and demonization, is like, I dared to travel to Cuba too. That's a pretty important part.
Right. And that's an interesting train of thought, because what you said about them recognizing you and that immediate switch when whoever had initially started talking to you like made that connection. And so I wonder if that's true. I wonder if you had been coming from vacation in Cozumel or whatever, like would it have been a different, I don't know. I'm hard pressed to say 100% that it would have been different, because I think, I think in all of these situations, the goal is to, as you said, to create an atmosphere of fear, right? And so I almost wonder if you coming from Cuba gives them a little bit of an out for what they did, right? Whereas if you had been on vacation in Cozumel and they did this, like, that to me is even scarier. Like wait,
exactly.
bro, they were on vacation and this happened on the way back. Like,
exactly.
What? So I don't know.
Exactly.
Can I just say quickly, just two quick things? One, the state probably doesn't find it helpful when people self-deport. They probably feel like they want to do it. Like we it's less fun if I don't get to actually throw you out and you just leave. And I admit it, I'm glad you brought up the Ebola point related to Cuba. I had completely forgotten about that. And I in the way you put it, I think is important. That would have been, as bad as COVID was, that would have been, or is, that would have been so much worse. Yeah. I forgot entirely about that. So I just wanted to, that was it.
Yeah, absolutely. And people can look online on YouTube. People have done some pretty good documentaries, but it was literally Cuban doctors who saved the world from multiple pandemics at this point. But Ebola, the Ebola outbreak being the most notable, Cuban doctors went into that situation knowing they would likely die in order to stop the spread of one of the deadliest viruses that had been apparent up to that point. Similarly with COVID, Western Europe was saved by Cuban doctors when COVID took place. Most notably would be Italy and Greece. If you recall, because Italy is under full austerity measures and the US has gutted Italy politically, they had no medical infrastructure. They had no public health infrastructure. And it was Cuban doctors who sent brigades of hundreds of doctors. Otherwise, all of Italy might have literally succumbed to COVID. And so my crime is connecting legally, of course, with these people. Like, this is my crime, right? And so to Renee's point, I sometimes don't think they even care that it actually is Cuba. They just use that as an excuse to repress, right? They're like, oh, perfect. Mm-hmm. So-called communist Cuba, got them, And so anyways, yeah.
The whole thing is, I don't know, but I'm going to use this for a pivot, because, the question of culture, and it's a pivot for me specifically because Cuba is also a place where you see these people going, pretending to be on, like, their music missions and all these things. And all I could think about is, the hidden meeting from a coup d'etat about musicians going to places to basically run cover for the US government. And as we all know, Beyonce is one of them people who made one of those trips. You see how I did that? So your whole conversations and your writings on this cultural shift and the co-opting of culture, right, is, this was the rabbit hole, just so you know. Like, this was the thing where I started on one article and like 5 articles later was like, wait, how'd I end up here? So just so you know. But let's talk about the and I'm sorry, because the Bayhive may really come for you after this, but I feel like it's worth the conversation. And I've never hesitated to shout this broad out, because I'm grossed out by everything about her. But so let's talk about the Buffalo Soldiers shirt and this whole idea of I don't even, it's just so gross. I'm just gonna let you talk, because I'm like disgusted by the whole thing.
Yeah, let me say out the gate, Beehive, listen, a treatise, Beehive, listen. One of my first concerts I ever saw was Destiny's Child. All right. I saw I drove 2 hours to Tennessee to see the On the Run tour. Okay, listen, listen. I used to be right there with you. You know, I'm coming at this with some love, but we can't have an artist who is one of the most powerful in the music industry, one of the most notable globally, backed by some of the largest multinational entertainment conglomerates in the world, like Sony, for example, Rock Nation, etc., and not be allowed to be critical of her choices, her decisions, and more importantly, the trends and practices that she represents. And so there was a big controversy that recently happened that I sent it to y'all in the email because I thought y'all may be interested in it seems like a Saturdays with Renee kind of conversation. Long story short, you know, Beyonce was wearing a shirt honoring the Buffalo Soldiers, which perhaps in and of itself is not that big of a deal to some. It is a part of our history and our legacy as Africans in the US. The issue, however, is that on the back of the shirt was this excerpt taken from a book by William Leckie. I happen to have, in undergrad, read this book. I happen to have known a thing or two about the Buffalo Soldiers. First off, Leckie is a racist. Leckie is a pro-colonial racist who felt that the so-called taming of the West, quote unquote, right? So prior to when the west of the Mississippi was not the US yet, he felt, this historian, this white man, and his wife, who writes the introduction to the book, believed that this was a good thing happening. And so the excerpt from the introduction of that book that is on the back of her shirt refers to Native Americans, indigenous people from Turtle Island, as enemies of peace. And it refers to, you know, them putting down revolutionary Mexicans. I don't have the actual full quote or excerpt in front of me to read it. I don't know if you could find it maybe in the article, Jared.
Is it? I think it's right here, right? Is this, I mean, is this from the back of the shirt? Blacks have played a far greater role in American military history than most people could ever imagine, which is already like, why are we doing that? For generations following the Civil War, 2 regiments of Black cavalry. But the point that the one you highlighted, or that that is highlighted for criticism, is that it says here that, as you pointed out, their antagonists, that is the antagonists of the Buffalo Soldiers, were the enemies of peace, order, and settlement. Warring Indians, bandits, cattle thieves, murderous gunmen, bootleggers, trespassers, and Mexican revolutionaries. I just think it's like, and all these reprobates, and then you got the Mexican revolutionaries on top of it. It's just, yeah, so it's wild. So yeah,
and you know, a friend of mine who is, I think, quoted in that article, actually, in one of the tweets, Julian, he was like, you know, Beyonce felt bad for y'all because y'all weren't getting the hint. She had to say it with her chest, you know. But the issue is, of course, not the Buffalo Soldiers conversation. Like, I think that's a very nuanced and complex conversation that many of us in the kind of Black history space have had at different points, right? But I think, so on one point, Gerald Horne points this out brilliantly. He's like, in the West, at this exact same time, East Texas is fighting the KKK. East Texas is fighting white people, settlers, colonizers. West Texas has this band that they form of Buffalo Soldiers, where in order to get the buzz citizenship, more or less, you know, in order to have some food in your belly, a house over your roof, come and fight the natives, the indigenous. And you're essentially praising the West side, not the East side, to really simplify it. And Beyonce, for this entire tour, as many people have said, has taken on not just an Americana aesthetic, but an imperial, a nationalistic aesthetic. And the nationalism of an empire is not equal to Black nationalism, is not equal to the nationalism of the native, right? And so we're at war. with Iran. We're at war with Gaza. We're at war with Congo, with Sudan. We're at war with African people here in the US for 400 plus years. And you are glorifying the agents of the colonial expansion of this war, of this colonization. And the way that these artists operate, right? I work in communications. I've worked in communications on my day job for a few years now. An artist like Beyonce has at least 200 or 300 employees at Sony working around the clock on her PR, her marketing, her branding, her legal team at all times. 24/7, there's at least a few dozen full-time employees working on Beyonce. And something like this doesn't happen by accident. She's not just in her home screen printing her own Buffalo Soldiers shirt. And,
like, which shirt should I wear?
I mean, seriously. And then to go a step further, and you post it on your social media, you upload it to your website. And so my take is not even, I don't actually even care like about Beyonce herself's politics. It's that as there is a fascistic shift in national politics, which has been really building for at least 20 years, but so much so in the last 5 years, artists, mainstream corporate artists, are necessarily reflecting that shift, right? The last time we saw this many US flags in corporate artists' music videos and their tours and their promo was when the Iraq war was taking place, and suddenly everyone finds the biggest US flags you can possibly think of to put in the background of their videos, right? And so my point isn't to just shit and shame on Beyonce. I don't think there's a such thing as a good billionaire, and I start from that point, and that includes Beyonce. It's to say that her fans are also being drugged to the right because now they are reflecting these very right-wing ideologies, these xenophobia, this imperialism that people like Jared have literally spent 20 plus years calling out. And the last point I'll say is that what happens on social media, and I said this in 2023 at the National Black Radical Organizing Conference on the panel with Jared, I literally said that there are algorithmic bubbles created in which you're having inside conversations about the inside conversations about things that happen on social media, and it creates an amplification effect. And so whereas the average Black person in a warehouse or at the gym or whoever is like, yeah, the Buffalo Soldiers is a pretty complex part of history. They were doing some fucked up shit, but also like they had to eat, so they were forced to join the military, blah, blah. Like there's a level of nuance that the average person is allowed to have that becomes removed completely from the algorithmic bubble. And it becomes this amplified conversation where now people are making ADOS and FBA talking points in the name of Beyonce, right? Beyonce, who, by the way, like it intentionally necessarily does not do interviews. If you were to hear the gap between her actual politics and the vague pro-Black question mark work she puts out, there would be a big gap there. There'd be an issue in branding and PR, of course. And so what happens is these algorithmic bubbles take something as simple as this picture that she wore, and now you have people on the left arguing with liberals, arguing with conservatives, and at the end of it all is Sony in a 360 deal with show ass, making $1 left, right, and center. So we're in a tragic situation when we talk about culture, because shout out to Michael or Dwayne, who was on the last weekend. The technology itself is amplifying and progressing this division, this really, really, really intense nationalism, this really intense xenophobia and division. And artists like Beyonce, and dare I say Kendrick Lamar and others, are profiting from this. They are making intentional choices to say, this is what's happening at a lower level. So how can I, from up here, cherry pick portions of that to get the fans excited and going and profit from it?
And was it in preparing, reading your, I can't remember where I got it, but didn't I just see that the brother that raised the flag at Kendrick's Super Bowl got arrested? So
yeah.
As a perfect juxtaposition and contradiction.
The brother who held up the flag during Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance in February, mind you, this was 4 months ago, that had Sudan and Palestine, had to travel to New Orleans and turn himself into the New Orleans Police Department for an arrest warrant because the NFL continued to pursue charges against him.
No, I missed that memo. What?
And one other point, Jared, what he has called for in response to this, because I have heard no word from Jay-Z, no word, we're done kneeling, no word from Kendrick. What he has done, the individual, his name starts with a Z, can't quite remember it. He has asked that on June 29th, we have a Black Palestine and Sudan Solidarity Day, and that wherever you are, you join a solidarity rally to support solidarity. So he, with no power, no money, no capital, has doubled down on everything.
And that's Touré's birthday, right? That's Kwame Touré's birthday in 29th. That's perfect, isn't it? Yep. I think, right?
It is.
Oh, that's dope. That is dope. Wow.
So maybe we have to do a special on the 29th, Jared.
and and just quickly, like
what you doing tomorrow?
I mean, I don't know what the day of the week is. Wait, that is tomorrow. Goodness gracious. Oh my goodness. I definitely have there's going to be a component, a shout out to him on the show Monday. But actually I got a deadline Monday, and grades are due Monday for my summer class. I don't know, Renee, why don't you, if you want, my quick schedule while we're live talking it would be for you to join me Monday morning, or both of you can, if you want, join me Monday morning, and we can add a Touré tribute to the show then. But tomorrow I gotta get this deadline thing tomorrow.
But I can set my alarm on Monday. I'm down.
Yeah. Come on through. And then by the way, we're already doing a football thing tomorrow, football show thing tomorrow, and I think somebody from BAP's coming on because they did a FIFA statement. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's happening yet.
Let me tell you something about those football shows, Jared, because I'm a football fan, and you have opened up a can of worms in BAP Atlanta because brother ZZ Lion, who may be in the chat, that's shout out. I call him that's Unc, honestly, but we be disagreeing, and I'm a big fan of Mutunda. I think that man can do no wrong in my eyes. Shout out Mutunda. But the way that y'all have merged politics and football, I have been hungry for this kind of content for years.
Me too.
So phenomenal work.
I appreciate it. I'll let them know. And I'm still talking shit to Hiram. We're supposed to be have another sports show, trying to get him to do a sports show, especially. And Hiram, I'm calling you out. His take on why Jordan is not the GOAT is wrong. So and Hiram and I have a whole argument about that too. But
Jordan isn't the GOAT. Let's start there. Let's just start there. But
oh boy. So why you do that?
But anyways, we can move on.
I did want to say, speaking of GOATs and flaws, from my generation, I don't know how much of it is coming up now, but to your point about how people struggle around the nuanced history of the Buffalo Soldier is the Bob Marley song. For a lot of it, I remember, I was very late. I had no idea of any complications with that song's history until much later in life. And I think a lot of us, but also to your point, there was he's not, in fact, it says stolen from Africa. Like, he's not doing the whole American flag thing with it and then using it in the way it's being used now. But there was, I think, for a lot of us, this, how bad could it be if Bob was singing about it? And, how flawed could history be? But anyway, yeah.
Well, also, that song has perhaps torn apart households, but a lot of people view it as subversive, like that is actually the irony. You're a Buffalo Soldier torn from Africa. That Africa part in all caps is a pretty important. And if I could also just double down on the fact that, again, what I'm saying is not about Beyonce herself. Because if people were interested in a conversation about Buffalo Soldiers, they would go read the GOAT, Dr. Gerald Horne, in his book on Texas, you know, or any of his many, many hours of interviews, or a number of other really great researchers who've written about the Buffalo Soldiers and the complexities of it. But there is a dialectical process in corporate capitalist entertainment and cultural production and politics. They reflect one another. I'm a fan of back when our artists had FBI files on them. I'm a fan of that, right? Not when they're performing at FBI events, or in Chuck D's case, the State Department. But if I could really quickly, I had wrote this out over a year ago, a poem called Tinfoil Hat. And I don't read poems out loud, so that's not what I'm about to do. But you can run down a timeline from 2014 till today. And nearly every national movement, there has been a palatable corporate Beyonce version of that. When we had the 2014 uprisings around Trayvon Martin, BLM protests, and all of that, Beyonce said, look over here, I'm a feminist. Chimamanda Adichie is on my song. Feminism, let's talk about feminism. This is the feminist moment, right? 2016, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling. There's, again, these same sentiments. People are in the streets talking about abolition, socialism, the Blackness leadership class. I remember there was like a renaissance of Glenn Ford happening among the masses. And Beyonce says, look, freedom. I'm on the BET stage. I'm kicking the water with Kendrick Lamar. I'm kicking the water, right? Kendrick Lamar is on stage and he puts Compton in Africa, makes a very, very specific statement. 2018, anti-pig protests once again kick off, right? Anti-pig protests taking place nationwide at alarming rates for the capitalists. And suddenly it is, look at me and my man performing in front of the Louvre. We're Black bodies who can be in the Louvre, right? Fast forward to 2019 when everyone's taking down colonial statues and the statues of the slave owners who owned our ancestors from here to Colston, Britain. And Beyonce's the Pan-Africanist, sponsored by Disney, which you can stream exclusively on Disney Plus. And right? And mind you, this is specifically a global moment in which Pan-Africanist sentiment was rising, because you're seeing visibly, you're seeing the statues of slave masters, slave owners fall down in Germany, in Britain, in New York, in Decatur, Georgia. There's a Pan-Africanist sentiment brewing. And so Disney taps on Beyonce to do the soundtrack, Black is King. You're taking on these very intentional Pan-African aesthetics. You're working with artists in South Africa, artists from Nigeria. Some really dope music was created. I'm not trying to front. Like it is on my gym rotation almost every day, to be completely blunt. And then 2021, mass pandemic death has plagued us for a year. The state had no response whatsoever. The state gave us no response. Black people specifically are protesting, are uprising. It's a George Floyd and COVID, what Mumia Abu-Jamal described at the time as a convergence of forces. And Beyonce says, I'm going to do a deal with Tiffany's colonial diamonds, right? Tiffany's colonial blood diamonds. Tiffany is at breakfast and Tiffany is drinking the blood of Africans with this diamond. And then there's this, again, an Overton shift towards Black wealth, Black grandeur. And then the last point I'll make, because I've already talked about 2025, is like 2022, 2023. We have an explosion of Black, queer, and trans culture for the first time in my life, at my short few decades of life. We have Pose is on TV, cracking open national conversations about the murders of Black trans women. We have ballroom culture going viral, going mainstream. We have many artists who have been famous in the ballroom world who are Black and trans, who are actually cracking a sort of mainstream space for the first time. And mind you, ballroom is a particularly working class phenomena. These are like poor, working class, queer and trans Black people from New York who are largely up to this point in the culture. She says, oh, I got a rainbow cowboy hat in my closet. Let me go hit this stage real quick and talk and sample T.S. Madison. Yeah. And so and I'll end it here is like, I'm not saying that she is some individual mastermind, probably the opposite. What I'm saying is that there's a relationship, there's a dialectical relationship between what corporations and politics endeavor upon, what's happening. So an artist like Beyonce, who doesn't represent Beyonce, Beyonce represents Levi's, Tiffany's Colonial Diamonds, Sony Music, her 91 different brands that she done launched in the last few years. That's what Beyonce represents. And that is what is in a relationship with politics and people's movements and what exploits the just and righteous sentiments of Black people, Black Americans, Africans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That timeline. And with all of that, you left out her intro to the Olympics, riding on the horse with the hair and the whole, right? And so, right, like
well, but see, that's the thing, Renee. That's the thing, though. There's a shift, right? There's a very, very decisive shift that comes with Renaissance, where the idea is now, I actually need to go a Jay-Z kind of route. I actually don't want to pretend to be political anymore. I don't want to make songs where my fans can attach all these random political analysis to them and they think they're speaking to the times. I actually want to lean into the opposite. I need to wear this American flag. I need to wear the highest platinum blonde possible, right? So,
I mean, the whole thing is, and somebody said it, you know, in the article you shared, they shared like various Twitter responses to her thing. And somebody said, like, why are y'all surprised? Right. And for me, that was like a key part of the conversation. Like, no one should be surprised when Beyonce participates in anti-Blackness, right? Like that's like her job. One of her jobs literally is to make being anti-Black not so bad. Because look, even Black people do it, right? Like that's part of her role in all of this. And so I'm never surprised when, and I don't pay her no mind, and I will be embarrassingly clear with some things here, which is like part of the rabbit hole that I fell in was like reading multiple articles, and I had to look up like who Saweetie is. Like I was like, is this a person? It's like
shout out to Salifu, because I already know where you got that from. I already know exactly what led you there. That's brother Salifu Mac from Hood Communist wrote an article about the Saweetie Happy Meal at McDonald's.
Yes, and I was like, is Saweetie a place? Like, what is Saweetie? And I had to look it up. I was like, oh, that's a person. Okay, like I am so out of the mix. Because I just like I can't with the world. So I don't listen to the radio. If I'm listening to streaming music, it's on like the 90s R&B channel. Like I can't do it. Right?
Well, I hate to say it, Renee, we've aged out. Even Musa at this point has technically been aged out of the target audience for a lot of this stuff. So like it's not all our fault.
For real. And so, but I was literally like, what is going on? And so, you know, so again, the rabbit hole. So then I started looking up who Saweetie is, like what's the story, to find out that Saweetie graduated from USC in 2016. So I don't know how much of a revolutionary anybody expected her to be as a USC graduate who was on like the dance team for whatever school she went to before she went to USC. Like her whole story is all about like, how can I get to that capitalist moment, right? Like that place where people are going to want to be me, because that's the goal, right? It has never been about providing radical thought or supporting the Black radical tradition. Like that's never been part of the plan. And it's so interesting. So all these things, like I've been watching all these documentaries. I just watched the documentary on Venus, who was part of that ballroom dance culture in New York, which was a fascinating look at Venus's life and like the whole history between them and their family. And so that was like wild. And I've also fallen down the Travis Scott rabbit hole with this thing with the concert and the 10 people who passed from like being crushed to death basically at his like there's just so much about how capitalism kills us and uses these artists in the pursuit of like literally like killing off regular people so they can profit. It is the wildest thing ever. And I'm like fascinated by the whole thing and also feeling super, super old. Cause I was like, when I figured out who Saweetie was, I was like, I probably shouldn't admit in public that I had no idea that was a person. And so
yeah. And I dropped the link you shared in the chat so folks can see Salifu's work
Yeah, I think Salifu's gonna be on Brokish later this month, actually, or in the next few weeks. Salifu Mack, one of my fellow editors at hoodcommunist.org. When I tell you that I send that Saweetie, even saying the name aloud, now, Renee, you've got me over here feeling like a young whippersnapper that I know who that is. But, you know, that article explains, it's called Understanding Exploitation Through the Saweetie Meal. And this actually loops really well into our conversation on what I call neocolonial capture. And I wanted to build on Glenn Ford, who talked about the Black misleadership class. But when he talks about the Black misleadership class, he's very specific that he's really talking about the political class, politicians, elected officials, more or less. I think there's instances where other people get mentioned, but that's really the heart of his analysis. And we all have a debt to Glenn Ford that we won't even understand for 20 years from now. But I wanted to understand, in an era of neoliberal capitalism, right, where privatization, austerity, I would argue what Amis Césaire calls the thingification of life itself, right, where every single thing has a price tag, a subscription, is financialized, that there's this corporate capitalist celebrity class that actually plays a really specific role in the Black misleadership class. They might not have robust state power, but they play an extreme role in the manufacturing of consent, in the selling of products and goods and services that we don't need. As Jared often points out, if we're not consuming, the system fails. And this celebrity class cracks the whip on our backs to make sure we're consuming, right? And so an artist like Beyonce, if we think about neocolonial capture, why is someone who is tacitly avoiding interviews, avoiding discussing politics, avoiding all of this, so willing to join stage next to the likes of someone like Kamala Harris? Why are they so willing to come out and tell you to vote for Biden? Why, on the flip side, is someone like Snoop Dogg so okay with DJing for Trump, right? It's because they are actually facilitating a very specific role in a neocolonial system, what Augustus Woods and Robert Allen call internal neocolonialism, essentially. And so I feel as though we can't avoid looking at the capitalist cultural class when we're thinking about neocolonialism and Black misleadership. And when we look at the Saweetie meal, there was also a Travis Scott meal. They're taking Black artists. They're not changing their production line whatsoever. There's no new product being created. There's no new chicken nugget shape there's nothing being added to the production line except for their name, face, and likeness. and they're profiting from that, right? And in turn, if they profit 5-fold, how McDonald's is profiting 500-fold, right? And so this is the kind of level of exploitation and neocolonial capture that we really have to be able to talk about. Hood Communist tries really hard to break this down a lot. Beyonce might be the most glaring example possible, but I could also talk about Nicki Minaj, right? Who, listen, Barbs, hey, right here, right? I'm right here with you. Listen, 2012, I bought my first Nicki Minaj mixtape in the Greenbrier Mall parking lot. I'm right here. I'm right here with you.
Not the specific location.
Listen, if you're from Atlanta, you know, it's the Greenbrier Mall discount mall across from the real mall. CDs, DVDs. I got Beat Me Up Scotty mixtape. You feel me? And so to give another example, you had Michael on last weekend talking about AI, the multitude, the many, many different things that are wrong with AI. But a topic that y'all didn't breach was how AI relates to art and culture and the creation of artistic products, more or less.
We ain't have time. It was on the list. We ran out of time.
But as someone who does that, and that is actually literally a part of my work that I get paid for, and we're talking about people losing jobs to AI, this is something that I feel strongly about, is like an artist, I'm gonna just say the point. I'm not actually, listen, Barbs, I have street cred among y'all. Y'all can't fight me. It could be a 1-on-6. I can take on a bunch of twinks with pink hair. I'm sorry. But you know, Nicki Minaj rolled out her Pink Friday 2 album 2 or 3 years ago and created something called Gag City, right? And this was the idea. She kept on saying, we're going to Gag City. We're going to Gag City because she's going to make people gag. It's a lot of inside jokes in the barbdom. But what they did was they created an AI world where people are using image generation AI software, where you put in an image, you put in some prompts, and it generates an image in response. Images, by the way, that are based on real artists' work. Like, they have to put in the work of real artists for the AI to learn this style and then duplicate the real artist, right? And so you had thousands of Barbs who created Gag City. It's this pink city, and they're using AI-generated art to put different celebrities in Gag City. They're making jokes about artists not being able to get into Gag City, and they're standing outside the bars trying to get in. All of this stuff is happening. They're doing AI to put themselves in Gag City. This was the first time we saw a corporate mainstream artist of her stature, the greatest selling female rapper of all time, manufacturing consent and approval and really, really pushing the acceptance of this AI art onto people at that scale. So in my opinion, you don't get to a Timbaland who's just like, I'm a thief. Hey.
I was about to ask if you all have dealt with him yet.
Oh, I would love to talk about, I was going to say something really inappropriate, but I haven't got to publicly talk about that. But you don't get to Timbaland, right? Who's an outright thief and who's kind of proud of it, without first having one of the biggest artists in his industry of all time at this point, spending a whole year where her entire marketing and PR plan, which again is schemed up in a capitalist boardroom, was AI. And so like Memphis, the air in Memphis smells like chlorine. The skies are dark because there are AI servers there that are like ruining the land for Black residents because of AI. But you can't get to this point without first having these big neocolonially captured artists manufacturing the consent and pushing this on us. And so now, years later, this AI image generation is everywhere. It's everywhere. I have a friend who published, shout out, let me not drag him, but who published a children's book that's 100% AI art. And I was like, yo, you could have called me. I could have connected you with 10 real life illustrators. You see what I'm saying? And so that's what this class represents.
We had to put you in a room with Mtume, and then y'all can
please.
because this is this was the conversation that Mtume really wanted to have last week, and we literally like just ran out of time because Dwayne had to go. But we'll need to circle back to this, and maybe we can get like all of us in the room together so that you and Mtume and Dwayne and I can just watch and let y'all talk. Because this is all, like, for me, this is all very fascinating. And these are people, again, that I don't follow. Megan Thee Stallion, like, I don't follow any of these people. I have no interest in anything that they're doing. So a lot of this is like new information for me, because I literally pay these people no mind. And it's probably to my detriment, right? Because while I'm blatantly ignoring them, they are creating a situation that I am going to suffer in along with everybody else. So it's probably to my detriment. And when I think about things like, Travis Scott and Saweetie having meals at McDonald's, right? Which, I mean, eat McDonald's every day and see what happens to you, right? Because it's just like, let's not even go there with the health things.
Not to mention Jared's work about, the marketing of McDonald's in Black communities.
Right.
That's
that
line.
With the whole thing with Calvin. Was it Calvin that worked at McDonald's?
Well, yeah, but there is that direct line from Nixon calling Ray Kroc, who calls Tom Burrell, who becomes the black ad exec, who literally calls himself a black capitalist activist or something like that. And then we get the Calvin. And then, which my generation grew up on. And then you get what Musa's talking about is the evolved.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think it's a brilliant point to point out. There is no new product. It's not like they've evolved some new burger or some new shake or some shit. It's just a complete. And all of it is meant to do, Burrell wouldn't use that language, but it all is meant to produce the Black misleadership class and the attendant. I think your addition, whatever, to Glenn's point is right on, that they become the garnish that helps grease the wheels for all the bullshit politically. Right. I mean, it's wild.
McDonald's is murderous, right? Like, you got IDF soldiers with their McDonald's bags in tanks, right? Like, let's not forget about, like, you aligning with a company that has clearly participated in genocide, right?
Even to bring it home, in 2017 when Andrew Young called myself and other organizers, quote, unlovable little brats who deserve the police. That was full quote, start to finish. Unlovable little brats, because we were occupying the governor's mansion and we were in the front lawn of the governor's mansion. Chick-fil-A, first off, there's a row of militarized police wearing fake kufiyas that they get when they go on the Gilly Exchange. Chick-fil-A sends this 100+ police squadron free meals on a Sunday at 2 a.m. Chick-fil-A's closed on Sundays and they not open at 2 a.m. And then just a few years later, Killer Mike is talking about how he can't go a week without Chick-fil-A, right? So we don't even have to, we can bring it back to the root. And also, I think we really also, shout out Killer Mike wearing a Kill Your Masters shirt while telling everyone to go home and be nice to your masters in 2020 in the George Floyd uprisings. I wrote an article about that for The Independent and subsequently received many emails from his PR team trying to tell me of the great philanthropy he does. One of the reasons, Jared, I really appreciate I Mix What I Like, the book, the website and everything, but the book especially, is because I think you laid a roadmap for people like myself to understand how to do this kind of work and deconstruction. And, look at something like liquor stores. During so-called race riots and uprisings of the 80s and 90s, we burned them down. We said we don't want these in our neighborhoods, exploiting our neighborhoods. We don't want, first off, none of these are Black owned. Let's start there. Second off, we have alcoholism problems because we're dealing with the degradation of capitalism and internal colonialism. And third, these are inherently exploitative. Why are there 9 liquor stores on the corner and there's not a health clinic? There's not a community center. We were burning them down in mass.
It's not a vegetable.
You said what?
It's not a vegetable.
It's not a vegetable. You got to get
you
got to get your vegetables from the bodega. You know what I mean? And so, fast forward to today, Nicki Minaj's greatest selling product is an alcohol. It's mixed Moscato. It's a brand of Moscato. I haven't drank in about 10 years, so I might be butchering. I don't know. But every single rapper you can think of today sells a liquor brand.
Yep.
But we had the collective politics collectively just 20 to 30 years ago to understand that rappers should not be pushing these kind of things onto our communities. And in fact, we don't want these things in our communities whatsoever when there's so much better objectives we could be coalescing around. And so the fact that everyone from Lizzo to Megan Thee Stallion to Jay-Z and the Migos are on TikTok selling flat tummy tees and waist trainers and a subscription to Bitcoin. I mean, Cardi B has her own Bitcoin, by the way. A Bitcoin which has been sued, mind you, sued for being a scam. Sued. Like multiple times that she is promoting. And so it's less about these individuals and more of what this class represents for a capitalism in crisis. They, you know, the last thing I'll say, I know I feel like I'm ranting now, but what Lenin said is that when capitalism is in crisis, it seeks out new markets. It has to seek out new markets. It has to. So if at the highest level, the new market is war, that's the highest level in some regards. They need new wars because they need new weapons to be sold, because that's the biggest cash cow we can probably think of right now. War, maybe some tech-related stuff. At a lower level, you have a micro celebrity class of people like T.S. Madison, who's a Black trans influencer, hilarious, love her down, but she's in her right word spin now, unfortunately. T.S. Madison is on her Instagram story talking about purchasing land in Mexico. And so in some regards...
She's on that Kaylee's, the Kaylee's shit.
You see what I'm saying? So is it that these celebrities are individually evil or whatever? Or is it that capitalism is actually so desperate for new markets, they're allowing people who look and sound like us into these markets by necessity? Because before, no one was going to allow a T.S. Madison to purchase land in Mexico. No one's going to allow a Saweetie to partner with McDonald's. But they're grasping for air and for markets, and it's a neocolonial cultural class that is like an inhaler for consumption. That's like an inhaler that you take a puff of when they're desperate. So that's how I like to think about all this.
And that's, I mean, it's very, I can't even, it just is like it is. You know, you wrote this in that article, and it's a quote. This is a quote from the article that I copy pasted, so I made sure that I read it out loud. Under the convergence of neoliberal capitalism and neocolonial practices, the Black entertainment class and political figures are increasingly merging into an amalgamation that serves the interests of white capital. And it's such a it's just such a well done statement, right? Like it just pulls it all into one thing. And there's so many pieces that people don't like. For as problematic as McDonald's is, one of the things that will forever stand out in my mind is the first time I read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And he talked about when McDonald's opened in Jamaica and how it intentionally left the beef that it was buying from the farms in Jamaica to rot, so that it could say like, oh, well, the beef here is no good. So then it had to import its burgers from overseas. And it was a big loss for the farmers and the butchers in Jamaica. And it's all intentional. So like, these are the things that, there's so much that people don't fully understand about how all of these things work in tandem, right? And you're right, it's because capitalism always has to seek a new means to continue to exist and to continue to thrive.
But I saw this morning, just happened to see this morning, that John Perkins, the author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman, was responding to apparently Luigi Mangione, saying that book inspired him. So Perkins was in some interview saying, I mean, obviously, I'm not hoping people go off and shoot people when they read my book, but the underlying, you know, blah, 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 blah. I was like, wow. I was like, you know, that's all right, you know.
Yeah, and he, you know, that
allegedly.
That book is on its third. It's on like its third version, and I need to buy a new. Like I read it a long time ago, and he's added chapters and such, and so I'd like to reread to see what the new information is. But this is all very like. There's just so much. I always feel very overwhelmed by trying to follow the threads for these things, because, and again, and I've said this multiple times, it's all intentional, right? Like capitalism wants you to feel so overwhelmed that you don't even bother paying attention anymore, that you just stay on your hamster wheel and just keep on spinning and spinning and spinning. But in doing that, you allow it to just thrive, right? Like it's like me ignoring Megan Thee Stallion and all these right? Like in a way, like I'm allowing it to thrive because I don't pay attention enough to it to like, to complain about it as much as I probably should. But before did you want to?
I was just going to say quickly, one point that you kind of, I'm going to say something salacious and I hope the FBI is not listening, but capitalism and colonialism have replaced what we consider culture, right? Culture is not a song, a dance, a music video, right? What made hip hop culture was not the 5 elements, it was the practice and everything happening around it. The products of a culture are not in and of itself culture. And to a certain extent, one could argue that what Luigi allegedly did itself was an expression of a culture more than a multi-billion-dollar grossing tour by a billionaire, in the sense that we understand culture as a practice, or as Walter Rodney says, a culture being a total way of life, which includes how we greet the newborn and say goodbye to the deceased, right? So a culture is our social relations, which themselves are political, they have many dimensions, they're spiritual, they have many dimensions to them. But a culture in and of itself, Michael Jackson did not create culture in creating Thriller. It's all of the practice and everything around Thriller, which becomes culture. And culture, unfortunately, can be a weapon against us, but we can also harness it and it can be a weapon in the right direction too. And so what you're saying about Luigi and these different things, I iterated this on a Black Men Build mass call a few months ago, but the very way we're thinking about culture has been captured, right? We're like, oh, Beyonce's doing culture, oh man, that's the BET's tagline every year for their BET Hip Hop Awards is culture's biggest night, the biggest night in culture. So
and for the culture, we hear that all the time. People saying doing it for the culture. Like, right. Well, what? So yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
And to an extent, they're not lying, Jared. You are doing it for the culture, but for bourgeois culture, because your practice, not your product, your practice. A Stephen A. Smith is doing it for the so-called culture he claims. A Roland Martin is doing it for a so-called culture he claims, because the culture that he is doing it for is not our culture. He is certainly doing it for the capital T, capital C culture. It's not our culture. And so I always like to make that distinction as well.
Yeah, and I always like to point people to my hashtag during shows, because I try to make sure that it's relevant for the show. And this is actually something that you wrote about in one of your articles, that culture is not the battlefield, culture is a battlefield. And I thought it was just chef's kiss. Like I was like, that's it. that's the word for the day. And I really I want people to read what Musa writes about, because it is, I mean, I spent, you know, you weren't on when I was talking about my process of like scanning through stuff early so that I have a sense of like what things I need to zone in on. But I wait until Friday night to actually read and watch stuff because I want it to be fresh when I'm talking about it. And which makes the rabbit holes dangerous, because I was almost late today reading, right? Like I was like, oh, I got 2 minutes, I gotta get on. And so, you know, I'm so thoroughly impressed by your ability to express things in a way that makes it stick, right? Like a lot of the things that I read in your articles are going to stick with me in a way that like I'm going to go back to them later when I need to talk about something and say, well, if Musa Springer's piece, you know what I mean? Like it's going to be there. And you are definitely, by the way, going to get a call from me when I get something that I have in the back of my mind going to do this PE on culture and cultural workers, because oof, right? Like, oof. Yeah. I don't know, like,
and just to add to that, the title of the episode is taken from your book of poems, which is linked in the show description, Alive and Paranoid, which I just started myself early this morning and am enjoying too. So just to add that to the list of kudos, and there's into the links in the show description, inviting people to follow up to the extent they haven't already.
And to that point, I'll say the left has abandoned poetry. The left has abandoned poetry, but poetry, in Audre Lorde's words, is economical and serves a specific political purpose. But the book is available for free online. Anyone can download it for free at Iskra Books. Shout out Iskra Books. But if you do purchase a copy, there's about 6 more months in the year. Everything that is raised from the book is donated to the Jericho Movement for Political Prisoners. I don't make a dime off of it. It was Sammy Dune Network, Palestinian Political Prisoner Network, but unfortunately, due to their terror designation by the Biden administration, I can no longer send them funds. But
by the who administration? Who
by the blue people, by the Smurfs down there in Smurfland, you know. And so if you do purchase a copy, the rest of my proceeds from last year and then this year will continue to go to the Jericho Movement. Or if you can't, just get the free version is also there. But, you know, the left has abandoned poetry, and we didn't really get into the actual cultural work aspect of culture, which is maybe more of my bag. But I think we have to really, there was something Mtume said, who I'm intimidated to talk with. You talking about put me in conversation with Mtume. That man is a genius, first off.
Listen,
that's a smart brother. Right there.
Look, I don't particularly love always being in conversation with Mtume either, because sometimes I just be like, man, listen.
Yeah, that's a smart brother.
It is so enlightening, and it is worth every moment of me feeling like I don't know shit is worth being able to learn something from him. 100%.
Yeah, and although I've written a few film reviews in my life, I am by no means a film buff, and I love and appreciate the way he breaks down cinema and film and movies. You know, I say movies, I'm country, but you know, he said something, he articulated a point that I have really never been able to say as eloquent as him, and it's that we have to readjust like the quality that we expect in the work that we're seeking, right? Every year for Black Music Month, which is June, I used to always do a corporate music diet is what I called, where for a whole month, only listen to independent artists for the whole entire month. No person who has a label attached to them whatsoever. You do not listen to any artist with a label. And what it forces you to do is to really reckon with what y'all were talking about with Mtume is, why are we expecting Marvel, you know, Universal Records, Rock Nation quality on everything in our lives, when right down the road from you, there's an amazing singer who's at a jazz club every single Saturday, who's selling her tapes out of her backyard, you know? And so I ask people to also think the same way about music, about poetry, about the books we read. if you can actually shift the center of your cultural diet to independence, to self-determined artists to an extent, dope rappers like Slank, Cakes to Killa, Mickey Blanco, et cetera, you shift that, you have a whole new perception, and you start to view these corporate artists as just that, corporate artists, right? McDonald's sells a lot of burgers. Does McDonald's sell the best burger in the world? Right? But then you got someone like a Ciroc or a Moo Fresh, right, who is giving you a really great burger to chew on, but they might not be selling 5 million burgers a day. And so I just ask people, when we're thinking about our own cultural practices and how we're consuming cultural products, to actually just like disorient this corporate capitalist sort of. I mean, even if you go on the Spotify top 100 right now, there's maybe 6 artists who are not signed to some major record label, right? And that doesn't mean they're not out there. You just need to go maybe one step further to find them and to support them. So whether that's poets, rappers, singers, there's all kinds of cultural workers. And then you oftentimes find, if you adjust what you view as quality, and perhaps it is quality of content, not quality of production standards, you're like, wow, maybe this actually is higher quality than what I was getting over here. So anyways, I know I'm on my high horse, but
no, that and that to me sounds like we need a list from you of like, here's some folks you can listen to. And I'm going to shout out Josie, who at some point is going to watch this and is going to say, I can't believe you never asked Musa to submit a poem for the newspaper. And so you might get that note too, because she'll never get off my back if I don't do it.
So let's put Musa to work, since you dragged me live on it. Like, Musa can write the George Jackson poem to whatever we're putting together for whatever, you know, like.
Whoa. Put Musa to work.
Dragged in, everybody's getting dragged in. And Leah in the chat, you could submit something. And Brittany, who else is in the chat? Latif.
Put Musa
everybody's
to work.
Getting put into work.
First off, Musa has 2 full-time jobs and 2 full-time projects to be completed by the end of this summer. So, you know,
no, it's all good. Saying no is important.
But also, let me say
no.
I haven't really been in the chat. I it's because I got a little bit of the tism. I can't keep up with both conversations. But there's someone in the chat, Stono Rebel, who is a good sis of mine, a brilliant thinker, right? Who deserves some shine. Who is a beautiful Creole sister from the Low Country in South Carolina, is where she resides. Who is a professional interpreter and tour guide of the African history in the Low Country, and might be a phenomenal guest for y'all to have on in the future.
Look, don't say less. Send an email, man.
No, it's wait. Let's do it better. Renee, this show is due for a road trip. Stono has invited us down for a tour already. So let's do this live and in person. You get your fam, I get my family, and we meet up, and everybody drive on. We road trip and do a live something. Let's
do that.
Think big. Yeah, so
I support that. And just 2 or 3
weeks. I tried
to
get us invited to Amsterdam.
Nah, listen, if the invites roll, I'm gonna become a regular guest on the show.
Yeah, I'm saying, look. Tours today, 2 tours today. Stono's, you know.
Look.
Stono was in Atlanta a few weeks ago and was walking a group of students teaching a group of students through Gullah culture and how to be the best interpreter and guide of their own cultures, in fact. And so big shout out to Stono. I took Stono to Cuba in 2022 and we've been building ever since. So
that means Geechee got to come too. So we got to
yeah, it would be disrespectful if we did that and didn't have him at least. Yeah, that'd be kind of shady. Guess where we was at, Geechee?
So we're gonna run out of time because you have a hard stop. I gotta. You have a hard stop.
We got real first world problems happening here. We got too many schedules and too few vehicles, and I gotta go. I gotta pick up the baby. I gotta pick up my daughter, who is right now one of one Afro-Latina, Black Panamanian veterinarian practitioners doing it right now. So salute. That's right. Salute. That's right. All of that. That's right. But she needs a ride.
So I don't. Musa, were you actually going to be able to do Monday morning? Did you say yes to that, or do you still have to check your calendar to see like if
I could probably join if you could just tap in with me in an email afterwards, and I can give me some specific times and things like that. As long as I can carve out some time at work, I usually don't have any problems.
I have to air an interview, so we would be like after 9 a.m. Eastern. If you got in that window, like that first hour, you don't have to worry about.
But I'll send the follow-up email because we did not get to Mamdani, and I need to hear. Right.
I was actually kind of looking. I was looking forward because
I gotta get that.
This feels like an AOC all over again, but
it definitely is. But we gotta do that Monday.
Speaking of, listen, we mulatto telepathy, but I think speaking of Monday, I am one of the co-hosts of RAP, Revolutionary African Perspectives, on WRFG 89.3 here in Atlanta. We are actually the last non-commercial independent radio station in the Southeast. Myself, Dartricia, and Steven inherited this show from the legendary Sobukwe Shakura of the AAPRP. It's a very full circle moment for me because the first time I was ever interviewed on the radio was in 2014 by Sobukwe on RAP. And then I started volunteering at the channel. And then about 10 years later, got a call to fill in for the show. And we took it over in March. And we will be dedicating the episode to Kwame Ture. We're going to play a lot of clips from Kwame Ture, discuss and reflect Kwame Ture. And even if you're not in Atlanta, you can listen on WRFG.org. It's every single Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern, WRFG.org.
Is that the channel that April's on? She has it's like a midday show. April, why am I forgetting April?
There is a show with a host named April, so I'm gonna assume.
Yeah, because I've done that with her.
Probably. We would love to have y'all on. We actually were talking about dedicating a whole episode to the myth of Black buying power. Of course, Jared, you'll get hit up for that.
Oh, I'd be honored. Absolutely.
Atlanta. I think there's a book. Let me grab it real quick. This book right here, Class Warfare in Black Atlanta, Augustus Woods. Can't really see it because it's blurred, but he really lays out an argument that some of us have been saying that Atlanta is ground zero, is the testing ground for a lot of these mythologies with what he names the Black urban regime, right? And so Atlanta, unfortunately, I am immersed and engrossed in the earn your liberation mindset, all 360 degrees around me. And so we're hoping to put a dent in that armor a little bit. So anyways, RAP, Revolutionary African Perspectives, on WRFG.org every Monday.
I'll look up the link and drop it to Jared also so he can add it to the show notes. We didn't even get to talk about your trip to Japan for your Korean delegate. Like, there's so much left. So you're going to have to come back. We're going to have to do it. I owe you an apology because before you came on, I crapped out on the pronouns. So I apologize for that. I didn't want to bring it up mid-show, but I want to make sure that I acknowledge it. But this was, I so appreciate you, and we'll have to figure something out like soon for you to come back after we do Monday. We'll have to put you on a rotation or something because there's just too much left.
I appreciate
and
that.
Somebody get us in touch with Stono so we can plan this trip.
Hey.
So.
And then on top of all that, Stono is a part of one of my favorite organizations, the Low Country Action Committee, that provides free groceries to Black residents in the Low Country every other weekend. So they're also an organizer on top of all that. But anyways, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all's time and the conversation. I wasn't reading the chat, but I'm a shout out to the chat. I'm sure some dope people in there as well.
Undefeated.
Listen, Musa, this has been great. Thank you very much. Renee, of course, thank you. Everybody in that Undefeated chat, thank you. And those who will see and hear this later, thank you as well. And peace as always, as long as you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. And we'll see you next time with more Saturday with Renee.